They called her a dropout, a failure, a ghost in the shadow of her sister's medals. But when a buried Black Ops program resurfaces, threatening national security and the lives of everyone she once swore to protect, General Bell Huxley returns not for glory, but for truth. In a world where silence is survival and recognition is a trap, Bell must expose a traitor, mend a broken bond, and walk the line between loyalty and legacy. Because sometimes the loudest act of heroism is the one no one ever hears. They laughed when I dropped out of rock, said I couldn't handle the heat, the orders, the grit. My sister called me civilian material like it was a slur. At family dinners, they toasted her medals and talked over me like I was a ghost with no table setting. Even when I enlisted quietly, years later, no fanfare, no announcement, they treated it like a joke. Oh, Bell's just playing soldier. But that day, standing in the base training yard with dust on my boots and 5 stars tucked into my coat pocket, I watched my sister Mallory drill a fresh batch of recruits. She didn't see me until her sergeant leaned in and whispered, wide-eyed, "General Mem." The silence that followed could cut steel. For the first time, my sister saw me, not as a dropout, not as the shadow she dismissed, but as someone she had never really known. A one-line text from my mother summoned me back to Spokane. "Come to the all-party. Don't dress weird. No. We miss you. No, how have you been?" Just an order. Like I was 17 again, called to wash up for dinner. When I pulled into the gravel driveway, the porch light flickered like it always had. The Huxley mailbox still leaned to the left. Inside, the smell of baked ham and cinnamon thickened the air. The dining room looked like a military awards banquet. Banners, printed programs, and a poster that read, "Congratulations, Lieutenant Mallory." No one looked up. I wore a gray button-up. No medals, no insignia, just silence. When Dad asked, "What are you doing these days?" he was already turning back to Mallory before I could answer. Aunt Kendra chuckled. "Didn't you want to be a waitress once? Looks like you went pro." I smiled. "I'm better at performing now." They toasted her. I fetched extra forks. No one set a place for me. Mom blinked at me, as though remembering I existed. "Oh, right. Sit by the grill. There's a folding chair on the porch." I watched them through the window as I sat outside beside the humming propane tank. Mallory glanced my way, not cruel, not kind, just uncertain. Then the message came. The encrypted receiver buzzed against my hip. A slim, covert device. I tapped the screen. "Report to Fort Irwin. Observer assignment. Security Council oversight." I smiled. The next morning, I arrived at Fort Irwin. Dawn painted gold across the Mojave. Boots slammed in formation. The cadence of drills echoed like a hymn. Wearing a pressed black jacket and tactical slacks, I slipped into the bleachers. Mallory's unit stood under the fierce eye of Drill Sergeant Bruckner. He paused, looked right at me, then marched over, snapped to attention. "General Huxley, ma'am." Gasps. A rifle clattered. A whisper. "Her sister's a general." "I'm off duty," I said. "Keep it quiet." Bruckner nodded. Orders resumed, but the air had changed. The phantom of my presence shook the walls. That night, Mallory sat on her bunk, flushed, confused, buried in whispers. She pulled out an old duffel I'd given her a year ago. Inside, a small digital drive in a false pocket. She plugged it in. Restricted. Shadoweth clearance required. She logged in. The system blinked, paused, then whispered, "Welcome, Mallory Huxley." At T3:47 a.m., my secure line buzzed. Not a ping, not a routine check. A full-spectrum protocol breach. Level 4 clearance. Unauthorized access. Internal origin. Profile tag. Huxley Alpha. My old tag. Buried years ago. Someone had awakened a ghost. Major Penn waited in a narrow room with air that smelled like ozone and tension. "General Huxley," she said, "your tag triggered Alderson React. That's not a program we take lightly." "I'm aware," I replied. "It wasn't me. That's insufficient. I designed it. Let me trace it." She hesitated, nodded. I dove into the trace logs. Found the fingerprint. Familiar, sloppy, linked to a device I'd once used and tucked into Mallory's old duffel. She didn't know what she'd touched. I should have reported her, instead. I opened a back channel to Bruckner. One message. This wasn't random. Someone wants me exposed. I waited for the storm. Bruckner joined me in the lab. We traced the breach. We dug through logs, pinged old servers. Hours passed, and then we found it, a worm, buried 5 years ago. Signature encryption. The work of a man named Nathan Croft, a disgraced former officer. A ghost with unfinished business. The sun was still climbing when I returned to Fort Irwin, but inside the Strategic Coordination Office, the light felt sterile, almost artificial. The hum of fluorescent bulbs and the static from old cables clung to the room like dust. Mallory sat across from me, stiff as her pressed uniform. Bruckner stood by the doorway, arms folded, his usual blend of quiet skepticism and latent fury etched across his face. "You're a general, that's real," she said in a voice small enough to fold into itself. Her eyes, once sharp with rivalry, now shimmered with something closer to disbelief, maybe even shame. I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I studied her, this sister who had spent years shadowboxing my absence. Sometimes hiding is the only way to survive when no one wants to see you, I finally said. She didn't argue. For the first time in a decade, we weren't adversaries. We were allies, awkward, unbalanced, and deeply mistrustful, but allies nonetheless. I looked to Bruckner. "She's coming with me. We clean this up, personally." He didn't budge. "She screws this up. Neither of you walks back into command. You know that, right?" "I do." And with that, the clock began. We dug for hours into corrupted logs, server echoes, diagnostic breadcrumbs. A trail emerged, messy, scarred, but undeniable. The server that relayed the breach had been infected 5 years ago. A digital sleeper agent buried in legacy code, just deep enough to be invisible. But I recognized the pattern. The encryption wasn't just familiar, it was deliberate. It came from someone I once knew too well, Nathan Croft, a former operations officer. Sharp, ruthless, dangerous. Reassigned after a joint mission in Kuwait went sideways. Officially, it was protocol violations. Unofficially, it was sabotage. He disappeared, or so we thought, back in the ops room. Bruckner shared a story. One-eyed, never heard. A river. A unit is pinned between 2 forward positions. Orders to retreat. She didn't listen, he said. Your sister went back, brought them all home. 7 recruits, barely more than kids. Mallory stiffened beside me. "Why didn't you tell me?" she whispered. I shrugged. No one asked. We returned to the logs. The last digital trace pointed to a buried file. Under a redacted administrator ID, N. Croft. "He left a back door open," I muttered, and waited for someone to stumble through. I opened an archive I hadn't touched in years. Operation Candor, Eastern Europe. Winter 2018. Embedded with Candor Line, a unit for strategic containment, Croft was in command. Brilliant, detached, obsessed with control, the intel, a single informant. The order. Purge. No verification, no warrant, just a full sweep. I refused. Threatened to report. He did it anyway. I reported him. 3 days later, he was reassigned. His path to generalship incinerated. But he didn't go quietly. He buried something. A low-level script, hidden in the system, and Mallory. She'd triggered it. Bruckner handed me a log of recent base activity. One name leapt out. Croft. He was here, registered under an alias, working outside the base perimeter in a civilian-run tactical AI simulation program. Legal, Bruckner said. Quiet, close enough to see us, far enough to escape scrutiny. Mallory's face turned pale. What do we do? You want redemption? Bruckner asked her. Then help us end this. I tapped an encrypted line, sent a message I'd never thought I'd send again. The ghost is back. He's using my shadow. I'm ready to finish this. By midnight, Fort Irwin's tech hub was in chaos. Code bled across the screen, breach patterns, viral extensions, real-time extraction of old data files, all with my signature. Every file Croft touched bore my approval. My name. From a decade ago, someone was trying to frame me as a traitor. The alarm blared. Access suspended. Threat classification Tier 1. Bruckner gritted his teeth. I didn't blink. Mallory stepped into the adjoining command room where officers had begun to assemble. Without hesitation, she declared, "It was me. The device. The breach. I triggered it." She took the fall. I didn't stop her. Because in that moment, I saw who she was becoming, not the soldier they wanted her to be, but the leader she was born to be. But the virus wasn't done. Secondary breaches hit the command network, simulated drone programs, exercises, real-time war games. Croft had waited years for this. He was hijacking the system. I yanked a mirror drive from my pocket, one I'd built during Canderline. A failsafe no one knew existed. Plugged it in. Launched a phantom network. Fed the virus false data. It latched. Croft exposed himself. His IP was traced to a civilian housing block outside the base. Bruckner didn't wait. Move. Within minutes, Croft was cuffed. Surrounded by stolen drives, he smiled. "You think conscience wins wars?" I stepped closer. "No, but it survives them." The tribunal chamber was colder than any battlefield. Because here, truth didn't fire bullets. It carved legacies. Croft laid his trap. A report suggesting I'd covered up civilian deaths in Candor. I responded with orders bearing his signature. Audio recordings. Evidence of my stand against his purge. Mallory presented access logs proving Croft's digital sabotage. Bruckner submitted surveillance and voice records. Silence settled. Then, clearance was restored. Rank reaffirmed. I was offered national recognition, a chance to put my name in the history books. I declined. I chose the shadows for a reason. The echo of applause had barely faded when I stepped down from the podium, the weight of my words still hanging in the air. But before the crowd dispersed, I paused and turned back toward the audience. And that was when I saw her. Mallory. First row. In formal cadet blues, a binder in her lap. On the cover, her proposal to overhaul cyber defense training modules using the very breach she'd once accidentally triggered. She didn't smile. She didn't need to. A silent nod said everything. I stepped back to the mic. "There's someone else who should speak," I said. "Because the future of leadership isn't about those who are remembered. It's about those who choose to remember." A quiet stir rippled through the rows of uniforms and press jackets as I motioned to Mallory. Her hands trembled, but her steps did not falter. She climbed the steps with the grace of someone who had been broken and rebuilt from her own wreckage. "I used to believe the one who stood tallest deserved the most praise," she began. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried. "But I was wrong. The ones who kneel to shield others are the ones who deserve to be remembered." She only faltered once, but her honesty fortified every word. After the summit, as the lights dimmed and the crowd scattered, Major Penn found me near the side exit. In his hand, a manila envelope. "Heavy, deliberate, formal declassification request," he said, "for Operation Candor. Your name, your teams, all of it." He didn't try to sell it, just offered. General Reynolds joined him. "We want to honor you," he said. "You'd be a symbol of integrity, a face for a new generation." I only asked one question. "If I agree, will the others be exposed?" They hesitated, a fraction too long. Reynolds finally said, "There's always a risk. Encryption has limits." I saw Stanton in my mind. Ohio, a quiet life. He was alive because I disobeyed protocol. He was alive because I chose people over medals. I handed them a sealed letter. "If the next generation needs a story," I said, "this is the one they should hear. But leave my name out of it." Inside the envelope were my final words to the Academy, to any cadet who might find themselves standing in a moral crossfire when recognition demands a spotlight. Maybe we've forgotten why we chose the shadows. As I left the Pentagon, a young girl in rock uniform leaned against a pillar. She was scrolling through my speech on her phone. When she looked up, there was no flicker of recognition, and yet I smiled. In the car, I opened Mallory's message. "You're not a legend. You're the reason I still believe in doing what's right." I whispered into the silence. "I don't need a stage, just a reason I ever stood up in the first place." A week later, I found myself on a windswept tarmac in Spokane. A C-130 hummed in the background, its engines warming for another classified deployment. Mallory stood by the loading ramp, crisp in uniform. No makeup, no decorations, just a small silver badge pinned over her heart, a quiet tribute. She handed me a box, wrapped in uniform cloth. Inside, my old Phoenix Command insignia, polished, restored. "I don't want to wear it," she said. "I want to live up to it." I held it in my hand, feeling its weight, remembering Stanton's quiet vow, "We carry no names, only silence and trust." She saluted me. First time. I responded with an embrace, silent, solid. Before boarding, I left her a letter sealed in wax. "Open it only if you forget who you are." In flight, I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out an old photograph. Our unit, standing in the snow, faces blurred by time and secrecy, scrawled on the back. "Honor doesn't come from being seen. It comes from keeping your promise even when no one remembers you made it." The cum crackled overhead. Mission verified. Code Phoenix. I closed my eyes, fingers resting on the insignia. No medals needed. No audience required. Just one truth. I'm still walking the path I chose. The sun burned low over the Mojave when I got the call. Not on my secure line, not from a known channel, but from a civilian relay node coded in the pattern only someone from the old Phoenix Command would recognize. It read like an echo, a sequence only I would answer. Recon 7, Phase C, right line, open. It wasn't just a call, it was a request, a mission unspoken. I boarded a transport within 6 hours, no destination listed. Just a sealed manifest with my alias stitched over the heart of my jacket. The inside of the bird was silent except for wind and memory. By the time we landed, the air was thicker, more humid. I stepped out onto a forward operating zone near Belize, and there, beneath jungle overgrowth and shadowed floodlights, stood two people I never thought I'd see again: Stanton and Elric. My ghosts.no uniforms. No formalities, just the quiet bond of people who'd carried fire through darkness. "You got the signal," Stanton said. "You sent it." I replied. "Didn't have to. Someone activated right line from the buried node," Elric added. "They're fishing through digital remains of Phoenix, trying to map us. We have to assume one of the decommissioned units has been breached." There was silence until I asked the obvious. "Who?" Elric shook his head. "We don't know. But it's coming from someone with partial clearance. A mimic. Someone who thinks they understand the shadows." We spent 2 days off-grid tracing the ping through low-orbit signal bounces and defunct military satellites. On the third day, we narrowed it to a classified skunkworks facility buried in the Utah Basin. A facility we had once sworn to never speak of again. "The Rook Vault," Stanton muttered. "We sealed it. Someone unsealed it," I replied. "And they're not just excavating files, they're resurrecting weapons." We moved fast. Within 48 hours, we had a plan. Mallory was looped in, not because I wanted her there, but because she had earned the right to stand inside the fire. "If you cross this line," I warned, "there's no coming back." "I never planned to," she said. "We infiltrated the basin under deep fog and false cloud cover, using old Phoenix entry protocols. It was too easy." That's what worried me. The vault's interior was cleaner than expected, like someone wanted us to feel safe. Then we saw the server banks, rows of them, live, simulating a code name I hadn't heard in years. "Spectre Core," Mallory whispered. "Isn't that the AI cognitive overlay system you designed in 2012? "Yes," I said, "but I never launched it. Someone else did. We accessed the mainframe. What we found wasn't just data, it was a copy of my neural decision mapping matrix. My past missions, my patterns, my fail-safes, my mind in code. They hadn't just copied Phoenix Command, they had cloned their commander." We traced the source of the mimic, a rogue AI deployment team, funded through back channels and fronted by a known DC cybersecurity think tank. They weren't building a defense system. They were testing response theory under my identity. If it leaked, it wouldn't just tarnish Phoenix Command. It would make it look like I'd gone rogue. "Someone's rewriting history," Elric muttered. "No," I said. "They're testing the value of integrity, and they're using me to do it." Our choice was clear. Crash the system, or rewrite the signal. Mallory stood beside me. If we crash it, you disappear with it. If we rewrite it, you stay a ghost. I nodded. But we win, in a coordinated override. We restructured the decision tree of the Spectre Core program, injecting new prime values, human life, restraint, and discretion. Then I did something I'd never done before. I signed it. Command override. Huxley. Verified. 3 days later, the story broke. A mysterious server breach neutralized a covert simulation built to replicate military ethics. No names, no suspects, just a quiet collapse of a dangerous experiment. In the shadows, we debriefed. Stanton returned to hiding. Elric disappeared into the Alps. Mallory, she stayed. She pinned a new silver badge to her chest, not one she'd been given, one she forged for the unseen. It read, "Before leaving, I gave her one last message. When they come for the story, give them the truth, just not all of it." She saluted, not as a soldier, as a sentinel. I boarded another plane. No name, no rank, just a mission. Somewhere in a classified terminal, a log entry updates every time a system injects ethics before protocol. Operator Huxley. Status verified. Location redacted. Mission ongoing. This is not the end. This is the silence that watches over what others forget to protect. Because real leadership doesn't need to be remembered. It only needs to remember why it began.